what the podcast is about are non-speaking individuals who tend to have apraxia, which is a mind-body disconnect. And those individuals cannot speak with, using their voice. Speaking is a fine motor skill, whereas pointing to letters is a gross motor skill. So spelling to communicate is how many of these individuals communicate, right? And when the first, and with that in mind, I just want to say one quick thing, that often people historically have looked at people with apraxia or non-speakers, and they think that because they can't speak, they can't think, that they're not in there, they don't presume competence, and none of that is true. These individuals have a hard time controlling their body, right? And so if you can't control your body, people make all sorts of assumptions, and that's been really difficult. And so I think that the subjects in this project who are non-speakers with autism have been up against all sorts of different battles, from people not presuming they're competent, from people doubting their way of communication through spelling to communicate, and then of course it comes out in many cases that these individuals can read minds, have a plethora of other, for lack of better words, spiritual gifts, and then the parents and teachers often aren't believed about that either. So it's like there's stigma every which way. Right. And the podcast is kind of a collision of all these stigmas and really trying to break down those stigmas and be like, here's the truth. These people are in there. Spelling is a valid form of communication. And yes, many of them say they have spiritual gifts, which I think we can pretty much validate at this point.
When you say spiritual gifts, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I first stumbled into this, which we can talk about later if you want, when I first kind of stumbled into this, I thought this was just about telepathy, right? And that there were these individuals and their parents and teachers were claiming they could read minds. And as I start meeting more and more and more of these families, and again, like I said, teachers, it's not limited to just families, one thing that they started telling me was telepathy is just the tip of the iceberg. And I didn't know what that meant. What do you mean telepathy is the tip of the iceberg? And it's true, because I think whether or not its ability to see disease or illness in someone and be able to diagnose it before this person knows that there's something wrong, reading an aura and, saying that they can see a color around not just animals and humans, but plants, being able to speak multiple languages, even though you haven't been taught them, or playing instruments and knowing music, or being able to access almost any song and having perfect pitch, being able to visit people in dreams, and then, I think some of them were just like mind-altering, shocking things for me, was how many non-speaking individuals have said that they are able to speak with people from the other side. And yeah, so it didn't just start with telepathy or end with telepathy. It's a plethora of things.
So do you think that this is an emerging aspect of human consciousness, or do you think perhaps this is something maybe we had before we were verbal, that we've lost, but that lays dormant, like that we don't need it, so like a muscle, it atrophies?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think we all have these abilities. I think this is all part of us, and in the telepathy tapes in episode 5 in particular, we get into animal communication through telepathy, and a story of elephants that knew when someone who was like in charge of their big game preserve had died, and they'd walk days to his house and they'd kind of stay there for grieving, and then would come back every year. Or stay there for grieving, and then would come back every year on the day of his death. Just unbelievably beautiful stuff. Rupert Sheldrake has talked, has written at length, a brilliant Cambridge biologist, about dogs, experiments he's done that kind of show the dogs know when their owners are coming home, and sometimes cats. So this seems to be part and parcel of the animal kingdom, right? And many of us have had that experience of phone telepathy, where, I was just thinking of someone and they call.
People like to dismiss that as being just coincidence, but why do people want to dismiss everything? Like, that's the problem. It's like, I think the real fear is being fooled. That's the fear, which is why the problem with any sort of telepathy or any sort of psychic ability, the problem is there's so many charlatans, and so many people get duped, and it's really common. It's so common. It's everywhere. You see these psychic palm reading signs everywhere you go, and because of that, it's